All right, good morning, everybody. I want to kick this off and welcome you. Thanks for participating in today's webinar about growth hacking your mobile user acquisition strategy. We want to really focus on how to make your customer acquisition strategies in mobile more effective, particularly from the cost perspective, and also think a lot more about loyalty and LTV. So as we are going forward throughout this, I encourage you to make sure that you let us know as you have questions in the chat. Also, this is one of the earliest webinars in our company's history. We haven't done this very much, so this is very much about providing you value. Please let me know if there are ways in which I can take this in an interesting direction to help you out. And with that, I want to talk to what we're going to cover today. So we've got some questions and goals already in advance that we're going to be discussing, very much about price and thinking about LTV and how to use organic to boost all of your acquisition activity. So I'm going to dig in particular about why organic is a useful channel, thinking about mobile app acquisition. And I'm going to also get on to some of this explicit data we understand about conversion, converting people from people who are looking at the App Store page or contemplating downloading your app to people who have actually downloaded it. Also going to talk a little bit about measurements and the ways in which our teams can be most effective, the core metrics we should all be tracking and trying to optimize around, and the things that we've learned from hundreds of customers around the world, and then get into some specific tactics that are really useful from an engagement perspective and that drive a lot of organic downloads and awareness, and then talk a little bit about results and measurement. So with that, let's jump into it. So at Apptentive, we think a lot about the way in which you can make an app that people really adore, that they love. We think that that is what the beginning and ending of a customer experience that is awesome looks like. And so, a lot of the things that we are focused on around developing a great app also translate into organic superpowers. When you have an amazing app that people talk about in the real world, it will drive a lot of your organic activity in a non-measurable way, but we will be talking today more about the measurable opportunities and the ways in which you can actually connect with your audience in order to continue to iterate and develop something that's going to be highly successful. When we think about this, one of the things that really drives a lot of this behavior and drives our emphasis on organic is that customers who come through organic channels are a lot more likely to stick around. In fact, according to Mixpanel's studies last year, they're over 70% more likely to be returning after 8 weeks, which is a tremendous boost in terms of how you are going to be able to drive results on the LTV side of the equation, how you're going to justify acquisition. So the more that you can figure out the keys to organic customer acquisition, the more you're going to be able to boost results on the back end from retention. And it turns out that this is a virtuous cycle because organic customers tend to bring in paid customers in even better rates, particularly because they help with awareness and conversion, which I'll get into. So let's think about this as a funnel. In particular with organic, we think that there are a couple things that you should be thinking about. So the first is the activity that you do around the keywords and the categories. I think in App Store optimization land at this point, a lot of people have spent their time thinking about what keywords, what categories I'm showing up in. This is really top of the funnel activity. When you think about your strategies and executing on this, what you're thinking about is what are the paths that consumers are going through in order to discover your app? What are the things that they're searching for? What are the results that they want to see, the problems that they need to solve? And then the second piece of this is which category are you in? We've seen a lot of applications choose categories somewhat offhand and quickly and not really test. But it turns out that when you test your keywords and you test your categories, you can see massive increases in the number of people who are coming on your App Store page. And now with better reporting from both the Google Play Store as well as the Apple iTunes App Store, we're seeing more information from them about how many people are seeing your pages. And so when it comes to organic acquisition, you want to be really aware of how many people are showing up on your page and what you can do to increase that top of the funnel activity by testing your keywords and testing the categories. And one of the nifty ways to do this is to use a tool from Mobile Dev HQ by Tune, which will give you real insights into your categories that you're in today and how you're performing, and then how people are actually searching for your app and the keywords that are relevant to you, as well as competitors, which can give you a lot of insight. So that's really a key top of the funnel activity. Another piece of this is if you are not a mobile-first company, if you have other properties, in particular if you have websites, but even when you have printed collateral and television and radio advertising, you are able to use technologies like deep linking from vendors like URX or Branch Metrics, or even build those links in-house that will drive people into your app and drive people to download your app. And one of the things that we see underutilized in that organic acquisition game is using your own mediums across other channels in order to let customers know about the mobile apps. So this is a really big way to put people who are really inclined to download your apps and much more inclined to be loyal customers, to get them at the top of the funnel. It's a strategy used by many of the most successful retailers in particular, and if you're not executing on this, I highly encourage you to. So that's really top of the funnel. But once you've got somebody actually coming to your App Store page, it's important to be thinking about conversion. And I think this is a place where what we hear from our customers is that they are not thinking about conversion nearly enough, because historically there has been very little reporting information coming from the app stores. But now that we have more data on how many people are viewing app store pages, we get a better sense of views versus downloads, and that's really how you calculate your conversion percentage. And the more we've gotten that data, the more we've recognized that there are really some simple ways to think about what drives conversion and how to optimize that. The answer really in general around conversion is that most consumers, when they come and look at your App Store page, they're looking to see what other people have said. So for example, if your app is a 3-star app, that connotes that is sort of below average in terms of quality. 3 stars is a sort of the in-between point between 1 and 5, but when it comes to consumer mindsets, we've seen that this is lower than average, and so it's really important to have a 4-star or above app and have great comments that are recent and have vitality on the App Store page. The descriptions and the screenshots absolutely are contributors to conversion, but more often than not, those descriptions and screenshots are places where you should be testing and optimizing along with your keywords and category testing. That sort of should be in that portfolio behavior. But the ratings and reviews, you have to actually influence your customers. And the important thing, again, is that this is the most influential thing for new customers in order to download it. So I'll get into some more detail, explicit detail around this, because we think this is the most important piece of hacking your organic growth story. And so I want to share a lot of the information we know there. And then finally, when it's coming to organic, you want to really think about the activation of those customers. Again, Mixed Panels data and other people out there, our customers say on a regular basis that organic customers tend to stay around longer. They tend to have more of a desire to use your app and an understanding of what it's for, but that's not just enough, right? It's not enough to just have organic customers download your app and then bet on them staying around longer. What you really want to do is think about how to engage with those customers in 7, 14, 21-day increments. Make sure that you're reaching out and making your presence known and adding value. And so a core metric around this that our customers are starting to use and that we're seeing working really well in terms of thinking about the adoption curve of organic customers is what percentage of your customer base have you interacted with in the last 30 days, and how is that changing over time? Because that tends to be highly correlated with retention activities. So we'll get into that a little bit more. But high level, everything is a funnel in marketing. In organic, we want to think about this funnel from the top of the funnel, the conversion and the activation perspective. And like I said, I'm going to get in more detail, in particular about conversion, because I think this is where a lot of people can get really serious wins. So let's dig into this. Why do ratings and reviews matter to conversion? Well, the data, we've done a lot of studies, we've seen a lot of customers, is that about 60%, almost 2/3 of customers check the ratings before downloading an app. This is a real driver of what they perceive to be quality or not quality. And while your app might be free, it's important to note that the context of the customer experience is that we have lots of apps on our devices. We also have lots of pictures and videos that take up storage space. And so every new app that you download or every app that you need to update represents a cost to you. Even if it was free to download, it's a cost from a space perspective. And it's also a cost from the space on your home screen and on the various screens. And so making sure that you're putting a good case forward is really important. And now that you know that 2/3 of customers are looking at ratings, you understand that that's one of the ways to win them over. In fact, only 50% of people would actually consider downloading an app with 3 stars. And this tends to shock a lot of people. when they haven't seen this data before. But it is really telling. 3 stars is not average. It's absolutely a deciding factor for a lot of people, and it looks like the experience is not as good. So only about half of the people who end up on your App Store page are going to be interested in downloading your app if it's 3 stars or below. But let's get even more granular. The details around this are that a 1-star app is obviously sort of the worst in the App Store. The difference between a 1-star app and a 5-star app is astronomical in terms of the conversion rates that you experience. That's almost 9 times, which is pretty massive when you think about it. Jumping from 2 to 3 stars multiplies your App Store conversion rate by 3.8. So the good news here is if your app is a 2 or 3-star app and it's moving up, every time you move up, you will see increases in conversion rate that will flow through all of your metrics and decrease your cost of customer acquisition. And then when you go from 3 to 4 stars, you almost double App Store conversion. And so this is where we see a lot of companies not optimizing accurately or adequately. They think that they're at 3 stars doing pretty well. They might look across the landscape and see that most of their competitors are 2 or 3 stars or a little bit above, and they don't know that the data is as stark as it is. And so they stop working on that or thinking about that component. But there's a tremendous amount of yield to be produced from going up to 4 stars or above. And here is an explicit sort of representation of the percentage of consumers who are willing to download an app based upon its rating. We did a consumer study last year with a lot of consumers. We've also worked with thousands of companies around the world, and this is really where it plays out, which is that at 4 stars and above, you start to see real shifts in consumer behavior. And this means that if you are paying for user acquisition every time that somebody lands on your App Store page, if your app is a 3-star or below, you're really wasting a lot of that spend. You're sending them to a place where they're probably not going to convert. And thinking about this conversion piece of organic is, from what we've seen, a high emphasis for most marketing teams in 2016. So I wanted to make sure that you had some explicit data around why this is really powerful and can help turbocharge your organic acquisition strategy. Fundamentally, the ratings and reviews are the most important thing to the conversion in the App Store. Also, at the same time that they're super important, we know that consumers are also lazy, that they are not taking time out of their days to go rate and review the apps that they use. In fact, more often than not, the bias is towards the negative. The things that make you go to the App Store are usually unpleasant experiences. And so this is an insight into some tactics that I'm going to get into that will really help you boost this, because we know that most consumers on their own are not going to go leave a review. So I want to transition a little bit into measurements, because as you think of this funnel, one of the important things about evaluating your funnel is core metrics on the back end. What are you measuring? What are your teams measuring? So the first and foremost metric that we advise all of our customers to think about is lifetime value of your customer. When you are able to say that a customer lasts in your app typically 6 or 12 months versus an app that has a customer base that typically lasts 1 or 2 months, and that on average you're able to generate similar revenue each month, your lifetime value is much higher than your competitors. It's much higher than people who have shorter lifetimes with their customer base. And you want to be measuring this and trying to get more specific about it. And there are a lot of debates around the exact right way to calculate lifetime value. The important thing is not about getting it exactly right according to the academics, but rather inside of your company, having a very common, consistent base level of an understanding around how your customers are valued, what they monetize on. So for example, if your app is a media app, you're thinking about time spent in page views and ad impressions. If your app is a retail app, you're thinking about visits, purchases, conversion rates in the shopping cart, and you're thinking about average ticket size. And those can be very different equations, but when you and your team are thinking about lifetime value, it helps drive a lot of the organic activity. And part of the reason around this is because when you boost the conversion rate of your App Store page, for example, if you are spending $100,000 a month on customer acquisition through pay-per-install ads, and you boost that the conversion rate because your app went from 3 to 4 stars, and you're doubling it, your lifetime value calculation helps you understand what you would be willing to pay as you increase your efficacy. You might be much more comfortable as that LTV goes up, so it really changes your calculations. But at the same time, if you're decreasing the cost of customer acquisition because your conversion rate has gone up, you now are not able to just double your spend and feel comfortable. Sometimes you'll triple or quadruple because of the way that the math flows through your models. And this is a place where we see a lot of customers who are very sophisticated in the gaming space being expert in their math around this. And so if you and your team become much more interested in calculating these numbers and talking about them, you will see massive benefits. And I really do want to highlight that this conversion rate is important for both paid and organic. It's absolutely obvious in the organic activity. You'll see the boosts in the number much more quickly, but really it does apply to both channels. The third piece of this is the customer acquisition cost. And so this customer acquisition cost can be calculated based upon, hi Florencia, sorry we're underway, but welcome to the webinar. We're talking about some of the key measurements here about organic customer acquisition and how to measure your acquisition strategy. So customer acquisition cost is clearly calculated in the paid context when you think about the amount of dollars you're spending against a certain channel or across all channels. But you also need to be calculating the cost of people staffed on your marketing team in order to optimize your downloads, to optimize your app store pages. Those people actually factor into customer acquisition cost. Again, this is one of the reasons why turning the lever on the conversion rate can really dramatically improve all your activities, because if for every person that lands on your page, you're 50% more likely to get them to download your app, your customer acquisition cost is halved. So that's pretty dramatic. And then the final thing is retention rate. And retention rate really determines a lot of the lifetime value customer calculations, but it also can be indicative of how you're performing in your category. Each category tends to have its own retention rate. In fact, we just put out a study last week about the various retention rates of categories and verticals. But your retention rate in the context of your historical success in keeping customers over 30 and 60 days after a download is really going to drive a lot of the behavior of your marketing team and your marketing activities. And like I said at the beginning, organic customers are 70% more likely to stick around 8 weeks after a download. So this retention rate, as you get better at organic customer acquisition, will naturally trend up because those customers are lifting up the overall equation. And this is, again, one of the ways in which highlighting and focusing on organic acquisition strategies can really power breakthrough numbers and results for your team. So these are key measurements I encourage everybody to be on top of and to have as language inside of their mobile marketing team, and even working with their mobile product teams and customer service and customer success teams to be on the same page about how we can move these numbers. So what are some tactics that people use in order to impact these numbers and to really drive engagement? Well, around retention, I was saying that the percentage of customers that you communicate with really is super important, and the way in which people use your app is a driver of retention and loyalty. And so there are a lot of ways to engage inside the app, from a survey that is really easy and structured to prompts to tell people about new things that are updating in your app. Maybe you've really released something that's special. Maybe you have a discount program you want people to sign up for, a loyalty list, letting people know inside that app after they've had a couple uses of the app and they're starting to become successful can really change the adoption curve. They can learn more about how beneficial it is. Making sure that you're being able to listen to customers is really powerful, and even potentially, and this is particularly useful in retail, travel, and hospitality, being able to even have like a synchronous chat or real-time conversation with your customers. These are all ways in which companies can use their app as an engagement mechanism, as a conversation mechanism to hear from their customers, to promote the idea that they're there and they're present. And all of these tools can be utilized in different scenarios, but fundamentally the use of these tools drives retention and engagement and activation in a meaningful way, which then flows back into your LTV calculations and obviously retention. In particular, when you have sophisticated messaging tools, when you are starting to think about in-app communication and engagement, going back to that notion of conversion, you can use these tools very specifically to drive conversion rates up by having better ratings and reviews. So for example, you can do something like Overstock does, which is after you've made your second or third purchase in the Overstock app, and not when you've opened it, but rather after you've completed that action, you can ask them very quickly how they feel about what you're doing. So Overstock says, hey, do you love overstock.com? And the people who say yes are pre-selected, they're pre-qualified, and then Overstock asks them to go to the App Store and say great things. This is one of the ways in which they take customers and they activate them. They really empower those customers to take a few minutes out of their day and go do something beneficial for Overstock. And referring to a few slides ago, about a third of customers leave a review every year in the App Store, and that's on average one review per year in the App Store. So when you start to activate your loyal customers, when you get to them at moments of success in your app, you're going to activate a lot more people to go say great things about you, and that's going to really help drive those ratings and reviews up in a pretty meaningful way. The other side of this that's super important is that the people who are not happy, if you make it clear that you're listening to them, the people who have said no, that you want to hear and you want to improve, those people take it to heart. They know that you're listening, and so they're much more likely to be retained. But more importantly, your team internally is able to actually drive product directions that will make the product fundamentally better and have a better experience. So this is one of the ways in which conversion can really be dramatically impacted, and you can start conversations that will make your team much more effective. And when both of those things happen, looking at 3, 6, and 12 months, you start to acquire organic customers at a whole new level because the app is just fundamentally better and you're activating your audience on a regular basis. What we tend to find is that most companies have less than 0.1% of their monthly active users saying anything in the App Store, and then when they start to implement techniques like this, they'll have somewhere between 1 and 10% of their people actually saying things in the App Store. So it's a pretty dramatic shift. So when you're thinking about results around some of these tactical strategies and how you measure yourself in your team internally, obviously being able to count the ratings and count the stars and count the reviews, that's a place where you can spend time. You can look at those numbers. The second place is measuring that percentage of your customer base that's communicated with. That's a measure that gives you insight into what you're going to be doing around retention the next 30 and 60 days when you're touching more people and you're doing it in an intelligent way that allows them to talk back to you. Retention tends to go up 2 to 3x. Conversion rate increases. This is a way for every team to measure its efficacy of the experiments. So we often see teams that will run one experiment around keywords in the first 15 or 30 days, and then they will note conversion rate changes, and then they'll change their category for another 30 days, and they'll note conversion rate increases. And so being able to test in a linear manner where you can identify the changes you've made and the impacts they've had are really important to sussing out what's driving your efficacy and increases. And then really looking at your App Store rankings. And in particular, when it comes to being great at organic, we see a lot of companies spending their time thinking about App Store ranking and their overall list ranking, but they're not as focused on the category. But the reality is that for true organic downloads, the category distinction is a big driver of who's going to investigate and find you in the App Store. And so when you were top 1, 2, or 3 in your category, even if you're number 100 or 200 in the App Store, that category of specific ranking is a real driver. And so measuring that and trying to have a goal on your team about where you're going to be in your category and what you're going to achieve and how you're going to move there can be really a rallying point and a useful metric. So I want to jump into, from that, not just the results, but some of the plans of attack that we think can be really helpful and tactical based upon our experience with customers. And we think about them in various time frames. So in the first 30 days, if you're looking to make some changes in your organic activity and you want to really boost what you're doing and get more expert, and then show to your team, show to your supervisors that you're presenting great results, we recommend thinking first about your first 30 days where you can get some quick, easy wins and run some experimentation. So changing the language in the App Store around your keywords, around the categories that you're in, the descriptions that you're showing up for, can be really powerful. And again, we recommend working with providers like mobile.hq on the App Store optimization and information side. Secondly, you should be getting a baseline of your conversion rates. If you do not have this yet, and a lot of teams that we see and work with don't really have a consistent understanding of what their conversion rates look like, measuring that, establishing a baseline, being able to look at it over a period of 30 days will give you a real sense of how you've been doing. And if you look back 6 months, you'll have a real sense of what the trend is like. That helps shape that conversation with your team. And then calculating that customer acquisition cost for paid plus organic. So that's not just the pay per install cost, although that can be a big driver if UA is a part of your portfolio. It's also calculating your organic customer acquisition cost on the marketing side from the perspective of who's managing your App Store presences, what are they putting in from a testing perspective, what are their efforts and activities, and making sure that you're calculating all around that, which will allow you to get a better sense of where you can invest and what you need to improve. So within 30 days, being able to work on these things can produce some really strong wins and a baseline of information that you and your team can discuss and optimize on a regular basis that will make you smarter. And then moving forward, thinking about more of like a 2-month time horizon, you're able to actually adopt more sophisticated strategies and implement tools. So, for example, installing engagement tools inside your app for in-app engagement and customer interaction is really powerful. I would highly recommend prioritizing, if your app is under 4 stars, prompts and engagement that will help you drive better ratings and reviews. Getting that in earlier is better because this stuff tends to be additive, and especially in the iTunes App Store, the overall rating of the app is an important indicator. So you want to change the trajectory and improve it as quickly as possible. And then you also want to think about what you're getting in terms of velocity. Right? So if today's velocity is 1 or 2 ratings or reviews a day, you want to be measuring and driving to 2 or 3, and then explicitly accelerating and measuring that from your team's perspective. And this is, while it's a simple plan of attack, it's also, over the course of 60 days, given all of the other things that you're working on, it's probably quite a bit to bite off. So sequencing it and prioritizing it is really valuable. And the customers that we see doing this view it as the start of a long-term organic strategy. So those are some core learnings around supercharging your organic activity and making sure that you are losing fewer customers or keeping people around for the long term. And now I would love to make sure that we have taken the mute off for people and we can talk a little bit further, because I did not see any questions coming through the chat. I want to make sure that everybody has time to ask questions and we can have a good dialogue. Oh, and now I'm seeing in some of these answers and these questions. So Scott, you're asking, is it best to start with pure organic growth, or do you need to do a bit of paid acquisition to get started? Our findings are really that pure organic growth at the early days, it's important. It gives you information about how people are discovering you. But if you have a budget for paid acquisition, that absolutely is a good way to make sure that your app is moving, and from the App Store algorithms that it's showing up on more of the searches, because when there's movement, the algorithms pick it up more quickly. Now, have we been able to take people off mute, Ashley? All right, looks like we've got mute off. So who has a question? Florencia, I see that you are off mute. All right, I'm going to go back to these questions then. What are some tactics that are not recommended when trying to increase my organic traffic? Oh, that's a good question. So one of the things that we hear on a regular basis is, should I go, if ratings and reviews are important, should I go pay people to review my app? Should I have everybody on my team go download and review the app? That is definitely not a recommended activity. The main reason is because Apple and Google are getting better at detecting fraudulent reviews, and so when you pay people through online services, they typically are reviewers who have also reviewed a lot of other apps, which then gives the big app stores a signal around the fact that this might not be a real reviewer. And when you end up with too many fake reviews on your app, you end up in a place where your app actually has a big delay before when reviews show up, and you don't want to get in that spot where Apple or Google are not thinking that you're doing the right things.
I have a quick question. Roby, in your experience, which are the best channels for driving organic growth? Email, social, web?
So what we've seen is that that's a great question. It does vary based upon the company. So some of the companies we work with have a tremendous email marketing program. They have real resonance. They have great click-through rates and open rates. And so for them, email is tremendously successful. In particular, email plus deep links that are tracked that drive you to App Store pages for downloads, or even potentially if yours is indexed into the app itself, that can be really powerful. But if you don't have a tremendous email program, but your website is very, very well optimized on mobile, the banners about downloading the app can be really powerful. Those two seem to be really standout. The third channel we see that people are using is social, so their Facebook page, their Twitter page, those sorts of places where they're connecting with followings. But that doesn't seem to drive nearly as much volume, and the take rate is not as high.
Hey, Roby, I had a question. What are some good, following this webinar, what are some good resources, books, ebooks, any kind of good websites that have great blogs on kind of growth hacking, and if I want to explore this more?
Yeah, absolutely. So here are three. In addition to Apptentive, where we put out a lot of information, we have a resources section. The three that we pay attention to probably the most in the space. So number one, Mixpanel has great data on retention by category. Their analytics platform is in a lot of apps, so being able to know what people are doing, what retention looks like is really powerful. The second is that the Tune, the company behind Mobile Dev HQ, as well as mobile app tracking, is specifically on App Store optimization, useful to think about keywords and search. And then the third place that we spend some time and we think that there's really interesting information is out of Branch Metrics, which does deep linking, has produced some studies and research about how deep links are used in email campaigns to convert more customers organically. So I think those are three areas that are really, really super valuable. And then here are a couple bonus ones just because I know that they are tremendously popular in the marketing world and thinking about organic, not just for mobile apps. So Moz, Moz.com has a lot of inbound marketing techniques, some of that's particularly around mobile app marketing, and then Kiss Metrics, which has a tremendous amount of marketing resources. Raja asks how to convert mobile app users to customers. You mean sales conversion? So this is really powerful when you have in-app engagement tools. The difference between somebody who's opened up your app and somebody who's opened up your app and made it through the sales funnel and actually purchased something can be humongous. In fact, in most retail situations, we see that it's less than a quarter of the people actually get through the purchase flow. So the ways in which you can get people to convert, there are ensuring that in the onboarding process, you are educating people about how to use the app and discover purchasing. And when you're doing that onboarding, it's not about, hey, come here, purchase something, and off they go. It's about demonstrating the value, communicating why you might want to purchase something, communicating where you would need to be. So that's step one, like what are you doing in the first 5 to 10 minutes of that customer journey? The second is for people who are actually finding themselves in a purchase flow, who exit. When they come to put something in a shopping cart, then they go to a checkout page, and then they exit. Most companies do not do anything with that information. They just see that people drop off. But when you have in-app engagement tools, we're seeing a lot of companies at that moment in time, if somebody exits the purchase funnel, pop up a quick survey and say, hey, it looked like you were going to buy something, but it didn't work out. Did we do something wrong? How can we learn about this? And they'll give 2 or 3 questions that are really easy to answer. And within about a week, they'll have some hypotheses around what needs changing, and then they'll change their flow and see how customers react to that. And so really interacting around people who are in that purchase funnel and trying to understand how to motivate them to complete is powerful. The second thing that we see around in-app engagement in the purchase funnel is making sure that the help system is available because, for example, if you're a retailer who sells on average $200 shoes, people can be concerned about making that purchase through the mobile app, and at that moment in time, if they have somebody that they can talk to, they could ask a quick question, for example, using an app chat. That allows that customer to get a lot more comfortable with the purchase, and in that comfort, they then convert. Does that help, Raja? All right. Let's see. How to increase mobile app installers to register. Many install, but they don't register and use the app. Raja, that's a great question. So similarly, right, I think of registration as having a conversion funnel, and so if people are falling out on a regular basis, you want to ask why and understand why. But one of the things that we've found around mobile app installation and registration is that coupling installation is really, really challenging for a consumer, because I've just downloaded your app, I haven't yet gotten value out of it, and then you're asking me to register in order to use it. The data is that somewhere between 60 and 80% of people who are asked to register right after the download are not, they're not registering, they're just exiting and they're uninstalling the app. And so decoupling that and making sure that registration is tied to something that's going to be an actual benefit is really powerful. So if somebody has downloaded your app, they've used it 2 or 3 times, they want to purchase something, and you're asking them to register and communicating to them that the registration will ensure that the information they put in to purchase will be saved, well, now there's a value. There's a distinct value to registration, and so communicating that is really powerful. But really, the most important thing is to think about how registration helps me as a consumer, and then designing flows and experiences around helping me and getting me to understand that registration is going to be beneficial. All right, I think that is right now the current list of questions that I see. Catherine, Florencia, Jay, Scott, anybody else have questions? All right. Well, so with that, I think what we will do is follow up. I believe we recorded this, but please feel free to ask us other questions that come up out of this. I hope this has been helpful. And what I would really, really love from all of you that participated is I'm Roby at Apptentive.com here. It's on this slide. If you have any feedback, any ways to make this better, questions I didn't get to, or a topic that you were expecting me to cover that I did not, please let me know. As I said, this is one of the first times we've done this, and we want to make it valuable. So we're here to help, and I really am interested in learning. But mostly hope you have a great Friday and an awesome weekend. Thanks.